Yeah, so I chose Jack Kerouac, and I'll tell you about that. Actually, last night I wanted to write like a little piece about why I chose Jack Kerouac, and that turned into its own piece almost, so I'll read that in a second. But, and I also went through all of my favorite Jack Kerouac books and tried to find a passage that I could read tonight. And I ended up actually just choosing a couple pieces from this essay that Jack Kerouac wrote called The Essentials of Spontaneous Prose. I don't know how much you guys know about Jack Kerouac, but I think that his prose definitely illustrates that kind of spontaneity. And I guess that's probably the thing that I'm most interested in his prose is kind of that spontaneous, improvisational, jazz-influenced mode. So I'm just going to read a couple of things that he wrote in The Essentials of Spontaneous Prose. He said, under the title Scoping, he said, not selectivity of expression, but following free deviation, in parentheses, association, of mind into limitless blow-on subject seas of thought, swimming in sea of English, with no discipline other than rhythms of rhetorical exhalation and expostulated statement, like a fist coming down on a table with each complete utterance. Bang, the space dash. Blow as deep as you want, write as deeply, fish as far down as you want, satisfy yourself first, then reader cannot fail to receive telepathic shock. It's pretty intense. And meaning excitement by same laws operating in his or her own human mind. And then under the label mental state, he said, if possible, write without consciousness in semi-trance, as Yeats later said, trance writing, allowing subconscious to admit and own uninhibited, interesting, necessary, and so modern language, what conscious art would censor, and write excitedly, swiftly, with writing or typing cramps, come from within, out to relaxed and said. So that's what I wanted to read from Kerouac. And this is a little thing that I wrote about why I chose Kerouac. So, actually, this printed off all wonky, so a piece of it's on this page, sorry. My third year of college, it was 2007, I dated a religious girl who was a beautiful singer, but ultimately way too rigid for me. So, May of 2007, the month I turned 21, I broke up with her on my 21st birthday. I also went on my first big hiking trip and took On the Road with me. My friend and I hiked 30 miles in 3 days, and that whole summer I read several of Kerouac's books because I liked the way he used autobiographical material, and I could sympathize with some of the mysticism through which he viewed his life. I liked how he mixed deep, joyful realization with darkness. I could go into a million details about my interest / relationship with Kerouac's work, but I don't have a million minutes to speak. I will say that Kerouac at the beginning didn't necessarily affect me as a writer, half because in 2007 I didn't necessarily consider myself as a writer yet, and half because he affected my way of being and way of thinking more than my way of writing, or at least consciously. When I started considering myself as a writer and writing poems very often, shortly after my infatuation with Kerouac's work, I realized I didn't like his poetry as much as his prose. In fact, I feel like his prose is more naturally poetic than the work that he labels poetry. I read Visions of Cody a few months ago, which is basically a more experimental version of On the Road, and I love how spontaneous and seemingly improvisational it is, yet also how it seems for the most part centered on each image or idea or situation at hand. Kerouac had some beautiful moments of clarity and detail, I believe. I think it's interesting to consider how Kerouac's Catholic background perhaps leaked into his almost confessional style prose. It's like he was trying to write himself out of the void. I am reading prose tonight instead of poetry. This is basically my first time reading prose instead of poems at a reading. When Dan/Evan asked me to read at this, I looked at my bookshelf and took down 10 books from 10 different writers, John Cage, Russell Edson, Rainer Maria Rilke, Walt Whitman, Tao Lin, David Anton, Fernando Pessoa, Frank O'Hara, Bill Knott, and Jack Kerouac. Then I felt like an asshole because they were all dudes. I chose Kerouac because I've been writing a memoir called Memoirs Are Lame. It's like 70 pages right now, broken up in these few page vignettes, I suppose you could say. At the beginning of June, I camped in Big Sur, then reread Kerouac's book, Big Sur, which leads to my first piece. So, this is about a trip to Big Sur. I drive over and pick up 3 young women from the Upper Haight District of San Francisco. One has on a big straw hat. One has on oversized sunglasses with accentuated points on their corners. One has on a red and blue plaid flannel shirt over a thrift store dress. We drive to the bank and end up buying breakfast sandwiches at the adjacent grocery store. I had tried to make a mixed CD especially for the trip, but my computer wouldn't successfully complete any. I've had the same stacks of CDs in my car since I drove from Georgia to California in August 2010. Most of them are nearly unplayable from being shuffled around and scratched so much. On this day of June 1st, 2013, we listened to any song that will play from the multitude of burned CDs in my doors, glove compartment, center console. We end up playing the same songs over and over. We listen to Modest Mouse's Building Nothing Out of Something, and I especially feel connected to the song When You Breathe Out, I Breathe In, Positive Negative. We listen to that song on repeat. I tell them that it's better to listen to songs you love too much than too little. That way the songs can undoubtedly remind you of the past. That way you can instill the music into your memory's sensitivity. And who doesn't love that? Who doesn't love how nostalgia can make the blood in your veins feel like it's dancing? When you drive down the coast taking pictures of the ocean that is the color of the girl's eyes you first had a crush on. When you smell the yellow flowers interrogate your car's interior fabric. We look for the Tree Bones Resort sign, the sign that tells us where to turn left and drive up a dirt road to the curve where a eucalyptus tree has fallen. Behind the fallen tree are 2 campsites. 2 years ago, I drove with my ex-girlfriend on July 4th. We were naive and didn't book a campsite prior to our road trip. When we reached Big Sur, all its campgrounds were full, so we kept driving. Phones have no service there. We reached a small town called Gorda and stopped in its convenience store. I asked an old man with overalls and a red hat and old gold-rimmed glasses on if there were any places to camp outside the campsites. He told me to drive 1 mile back from where we came and take the dirt road to the right at Tree Bones Resort. The next morning we heard something up on the dirt road by my car. It sounded like animals having sex. We walked up and found an old man with a long black coat on with a machete tucked into it. He wore a black hat with a skull on it. He had huge, cloudy 1970s sunglasses on. His name was Mock. He was sitting on the fallen tree. He had been making the noise we heard, hacking up phlegm. He said he lived 10 miles up the mountain, that he had decided to walk this morning to get his mail at the bottom of the mountain. He pointed to the hemlock growing around the fallen tree and told us that's what Socrates supposedly ate to die. Socrates was supposedly sentenced to death for corrupting the youth and going against the traditions gods and introducing new ones. Mock told me that my car was just another piece of the biosphere. I asked him how much he loves living in such a beautiful place. He asked, have I ever let the mother hold me for a while? He said that living here was like a cow inside of a fence of an immaculate landscape, sticking its head outside of the fence to lick at a dying flower. Then he made his way up the mountain. On June 1st, 2013, we drive up the dirt road toward the fallen tree. I always hope to get lucky that no one else has staked out the remote site. Usually if someone has staked out the site by the fallen tree, the alternative site down the mountain about 50 yards is open. We see a white van backed into the dirt parking spot. We park to the side of it. I asked my friend with the thrift store dress if she'll go down with me to see if the alternative site is available. We climb over the fallen tree and see a young man in his early 20s playing the guitar, sitting on his van's driver's seat that he had transported. He tells me no one's camping in the alternative site. We go back to the car to tell the other two that we can camp here, then start lugging things down. I set up the tent with the help of my friend in the thrift store dress and start a fire extremely quickly because the wood is so dry. The woman with the straw hat takes pictures of me lying down by the fire, stoking it. She is laughing. The young woman with the oversized sunglasses pours orange juice and vodka into a gigantic crystal geyser natural spring water bottle and starts passing it around. She is beautiful. She has a white shirt with a black pocket on its chest. Her teeth are perfect. Her voice reminds me of syrup. She asks me to help her off the grass. She smiles very big, and I hold limbs out of her way as we all take the bottle down through the thicket of brush and briars and squatty trees to the very edge of the mountain that overlooks the Pacific Ocean. We start calling the bottle the geyser. I say, "Pass me the geyser." We watch the sunrise. The sun always seems to start racing toward its end, then slow down at its final drop when I am in the wilderness. When I am in the city, I don't see the sunset. When I am in the city, I am on the internet. When I am in the city, I don't clean my car. I teach high school kids vocabulary, grammar, and critical reading. In the city, I walk down to the beach beside my house and lie down. I hardly ever see the stars. In the city, I look through a telescope and see Jupiter and its moons. In the city, I watch old westerns on silent with subtitles while I collaborate on a typewriter with my friends. We steal the subtitles for lines. We will one day write a chapbook as a revisionary western. In the city, I smell the succulent plants that grow in between the apartment buildings cluttered around me. In the city, we light candles in an abandoned apartment and hold readings that end up being parties. We were by the fire on June 1st, 2013, and 3 dudes come stumbling through the darkness looking for their friend. We tell them we haven't seen him. At the end of the night, after the woman with the sunglasses and the woman with the straw hat have fallen asleep, my friend and I and the guitar player who has walked down to hang out with us hear something rustling through the brush. The guitar player breaks out his knife. The woman laughs. The women in the tent say, "Quit laughing, you're leading whatever it is down here." The sound keeps getting louder and closer in the brush. I say, "Hey, who are you?" Say something, "Hey." But nothing responds. My friend keeps laughing. I playfully imagine that it's Mock, the old man hacking up phlegm, coming down to give me wisdom, that he's coming to give me a map to an uncharted place somewhere inland, that he's coming to bring me medicine from his woody basement, and I think it's a bear coming to eat me, and I am not scared. Then a young man comes drunkenly falling out of the thicket, dragging a blue holy sleeping bag. I say, "Why didn't you answer when I called out to you?" He says, "I don't know." He wants to crash with us. I tell him, "Hey, you need to find your friends," and I point in the direction where I had last seen them walk. I take off my shoes and crawl into the tent next to the woman with the sunglasses, and she now has her sunglasses off. She now has stretchy black pants on and says she is cold. She makes a noise when I get close to her, when I attempt to make her warm. That's that one. Cool. So I'm going to read like a little short one here. It's my last little thing here. And like I said in that intro, I usually read poems at readings. And so it's a lot different to read these stories that are a few pages long, because it's a completely different dynamic. And one thing I realized when I write poems, I'm like all about the line. So I want every single line to be almost self-sufficient and to pop. And then when I write prose, it's almost like I want every paragraph to be kind of a life of its own, but also, be working in relationship with the other paragraphs. So, okay. I remember going to church with my parents and falling asleep in my mom's lap. When I was in high school, I'd sneak off with a friend my age and play pool in the youth room. When I was a freshman in college, I'd go to the small chapel on campus for the Catholic Mass every Monday for a year, even though I wasn't Catholic. One Monday I realized I didn't like the ritual aspect. I didn't like the fact that when I looked around, it seemed like the language memorized and being spoken had become completely disembodied. And I didn't know if I liked the language anyway. Now I don't go to church, except occasionally when I'm at my parents' house. I usually feel hypercritical of the preacher's sermon and end up admiring the feeling in some of the choir songs. My parents' church has an exceptional choir. I always watch it when everyone is watching something else. But the rituals still bother me. I do like the community a church can offer, plus I don't think all rituals are stale. In fact, I think we perform rituals whether we want to or not. We're performing rituals right now. I remember it used to rain hard when I lived at a loft complex that was over 100 years old. It used to be a cotton mill. It used to rain and I would always keep my bedroom window open so I could smell the rain. The rain would get so hard that it would start busting through the small space below our tall, peeling French front doors. The rain came into our living room until it was standing water, and I kept the music going through the speakers. Then we decided to walk around the complex looking for pieces of wood that would block the rain. Really, I didn't care if our loft got flooded. I didn't care if all the wires tangled under all of our tables stopped working. I didn't care because I thought our loft was getting baptized. I thought that the rain would just clean our loft, purify it. But we found wood anyway, and we tried to block the rain anyway, but the wood wouldn't block the rain. The wood only stressed us out more because we ended up being outside in the rain looking for it. Our shirts weighed us down. We walked around in the flooding rain looking for wood. Then while setting up the wood in front of our door as the water poured down the hill, we got even more wet. I went inside and laid down in the living room pond. The music was still playing. Our ceilings were exceptionally high with sturdy wood holding everything up. The walls were chalky brick running all the way between the tall windows to the ceiling. It gave the place a resonant echo. It made me feel like ghosts of some sort were cuddled up in the top corners. My roommate had a dream that he picked up a girl at a bar and brought her back to our loft to find out that she was a demon. I had a dream that I woke up in the same loft but lived there alone and the separate rooms were gone. It was just one huge room and I had my bed in the corner. I got out of my bed in the dream and walked to our front door, which was the same as usual, but outside was different. Outside was reminiscent of my parents' current neighborhood, a fairly nice subdivision, well-kept lawns, the sun shining aggressively like it does during a Georgia summer. A young blonde girl was bouncing a red ball on the street. Next thing I know, the ball rolls to my foot and I bend down to pick it up. My first instinct is to take the ball to the young girl, so I walk over to her and bend down and say, "Here's your ball." She looks at me calmly, takes the ball back, and looking into my eyes says, "I am a ghost." That is the only thing she says in the dream. At that moment, I do not remember intense fear. I remember feeling a dark, subtle force run through my body. I remember feeling calm. I remember looking around the sunny neighborhood and realizing no one else was around, just me and her. I did not look at her again. Her eyes intimidated me. I walked back to our tall, white, 100-year-old door where I felt comfortable and opened it.